My name is Fira Ramelan, and I'm the regional mentor of the DC2 project. We are going to discuss about research communications, specifically on the formulation of communications objectives. I'm going to move to the second slide. So our agenda is, first, we're going to review the progress, the steps that already covered in research communications, and then we're going to discuss about how to formulate communications objectives, and review the draft of communication objectives of the participating projects. Now, the third slide. These are the first 5 steps in research communications that we've discussed in the first webinar. The first step is the assessing program readiness. In this step, we assess the program or the project or the organization in terms of their readiness to do research communications. We're going to assess the staff capacity, their skills, their roles in the organizations or in the project, and then the resources available, whether they have financial and human resources to do this research communications, and also time allocated for all activities that might require for this research communication. The second step is the situational analysis, which is especially focusing on the inventory of existing communication activities and products. This is important because by identifying or having all those existing activities and products in place, then we will be able to evaluate the strengths, the weaknesses, what works, what does not work, and so on, and then how to improve from the existing materials that we have. The third step is the purposes. It's actually main intentions. This is similar to uses in UAV. And the fourth step is actually about the audiences. Audience research is important to confirm media preferences, trust, relationships, and context. If you see from this diagram, the fourth step, the color of the fourth step is different with others, just to emphasize that this is important. And this also has the link with the situational analysis. We will be discussing this later on. And the fifth step is the methods and media combinations for each audience group. Now the fourth slide. What is communication objectives actually? And why is it important and how we can formulate that? Communication objectives indicate the specific changes you are hoping to help achieve, whether in policy, in awareness, in behavior, or many others. This objective is important, especially to guide us to be able to design the communication strategy. And usually, the best way to define or to formulate communication objectives is by following the SMART formula: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. But if it is it's not a requirement. If it is too difficult for you to follow this formula, it's okay. You don't have to follow this, following each of specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound if it's not possible. It's just an option. Now, slide 5. Communication objectives built on three main components. First is communication purposes, the what, the target audience or the who, and media and methods or the how. Now we are moving to the slide 6. These are some examples of communications objectives. The first example, to increase knowledge of 80% of women who have babies 0 to 5 years old in 3 provinces of XYZ in W country, so that hand washing behavior increased from 10% to 40% between January 2010 to January 2013. Remember that the communication objectives indicate the change, whether in terms of the awareness, in terms of the behavior, and so on. It implies in this example. Here, hand washing behavior increased from 10 to 40%. So this also indicates the measurable in a SMART formula. And from January 2010 to January 2013 indicates the time bound. And also 80% of women who have babies 0 to 5 years old in 3 provinces of XYZ in W country is actually specific target audience of this communications project. Second example, to get XYZ strategy document adopted and signed by the newly elected Minister of Environment before December 2014. This example is not as specific as this one. If we cannot formulate as specific as this one, it's also fine, as long as you can indicate and measure the change that you are going to achieve through communication, which in this example is that the strategy document adopted and signed by the newly elected Minister of Environment before December 2014. Slide 7. This is the real case of NASDIC project in India. They have 2 objectives in their mind. First is for external communications, and second is for internal communication. They want to know how to communicate the findings of the data collection effectively to the government. So the government is the target audience here. They want to know how to phrase the messaging in a constructive way and which communication tools that are appropriate to send the message effectively to the government. So this is not really the communications objective that we are talking about, but this is what they want actually. Guiding questions to help draft communications objectives. So for the purpose or intention from this example is to communicate the findings of the data collection effectively to the government. Sorry, we are now in the slide 8. But then they have problem on communicating the findings to the government because the relationship with the government is not there, does not exist. It's zero, no relationship with the government. And this proposal is still too broad. The challenges we need to address, which is you can see in the slide 9, is how to phrase the messaging in a constructive way. These are their questions. Which communication tools to use, and how do we know which ones are most appropriate? How to transform this kind of need into SMART formula, which is the slide 10. We are now in slide 10. First, we need to be specific on, because of the purpose or intention of the project still too broad, then we need to be specific on what specific research findings do you want to convey. If they are government, what ministries or agencies that we are going to targeting, central or local government or both, and also ask the project, has the relationship with the government been built well? Do they really know about our project? Are they aware on the benefits of your project to improve their works, for example? And also it might be better if you could ask yourself or your project, have you searched for individuals or policy champions within government you are dealing with who will play a key role in driving for a change? If you want to communicate with the government about your research findings, about the evidence that you have, you want the government to act on it, right? But then have you searched for individuals or policy champions within the government that will play a key role in driving for that change? Have you also searched for organizations or coalitions that you could work with to make your communication plan effective? And what do you expect or want your target audience to think, knowledge, to feel, their attitude change, or act, their practice change, in what period of time after they receive the material? So by being specific on this, we are be able to measure at the end of this communications activities or program that we are having, then what would be the impact of these activities in terms of the knowledge, feel, and attitude? And what are the best media and methods and time to reach them? So here, audience research is important to verify the selection of media and methods. So based on this kind of guiding questions, then NASDIC project actually now realizing they need to be more focused on what they want to achieve within what period of time. So from this, the broad ideas or the purpose of communications that's still too broad, they're narrowing it down, and then the communication objective that they are developing now is actually to develop or to build a strong relationship with the government. And the outcomes that they will measure is actually, it relates actually to the response of the government that they are targeting. Whether the government expect to see them, like to see them, or love to see them. So these are the outputs actually that they set up to measure to what extent they can push communications to achieve that outcomes. Now we are on the slide 12. Objective 2 for internal communications. As PAJRA will increasingly take the lead in the next phase of the project, they ask how to formulate PAJRA, the local NGO that they're working with, all relevant information on the background of the project so that they can adequately manage it. What kind of information should be provided and how? The guiding questions to help draft communications objectives, which are slide 13, is what is the purpose? What stakeholders are involved? What methods and media are most appropriate? This actually the three elements that builds communication objectives that I've mentioned in the beginning. So possible answers for this. The second purpose seems to be related to transfer of knowledge and educate PAJRA, the local NGO that they're working with, to take the leadership in the next stage of the project. Then they need to engage PAJRA in some form of training, capacity building, such as practical strategies to use evidence-based results, research communications, or action research. And training materials to be provided, and then also timing and setting should be based and verified through our audience research. Now about the Cambodia project. Their primary audience is the government. The intent, or they think or feel, they want to be viewed as a potential technology solution to manage tuberculosis care, specifically active case finding and contact tracing. In terms of practice, they want the government support adoption of use in other geographical areas. So it's a matter of the scaling up of the project of the intervention that they do. Now the guiding questions to help draft communications objectives, again, this relates with the three elements that build communications objectives is the purpose, the stakeholders, and media and methods. To ask them to be more specific to what they want, actually we can ask them, why do they want to be viewed as technology solution provider to manage CBK? So from the explanations that they gave to us, it's clear that they want to target to the government, and to the government, they want the government to scale up their intervention to other geographical areas. And then also ask them to define what roles that they can play with regards to the intent of their communication. which policymakers can make the decision necessary to meet their objectives. These also are questions that we should ask them to be able for them to be more specific on what they want to achieve. This, you can see this on the slide 18. And also ask them, can they reach these decision makers directly? If not, who they can reach? Who has influence with their key policymakers? Can they turn these influential groups or individuals into coalition partners? What is the government's current view of their project? How much do the government know about their project, the Cambodia's project? What are the interests of the government, the key values and core concerns that can help the project to reach their heart? How might government benefit by scaling up technology to manage TB care that the project provided? So these are the basic questions that the Cambodia's project needs to answer to be able for them to define specific communications objectives and how to reach them effectively. So we are actually talking about communications objectives, which you can see in the slide 20 as the step 6. Define it based on the purpose, audience, and methods and media. These three important things that builds communication objectives. And once we define this clearly and specifically, we are be able to develop communication strategy design, which is step 7 in research communications. Followed by the pre-testing, implementation, monitoring and evaluation, and as the last step is actually the institutionalization. These are some useful information relates with these research communications and communications objectives that you can search on. Okay, I think that's all.